It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome, folks. This is Steve Moore. This is the More Money Show. This is WABC Talk Radio, the number one talk radio station in these United States. Always a great privilege for me to sit in front of this microphone for the More Money Show on WABC and many affiliates throughout the country, especially the Northeast. Thank you so much for our regular listeners who've helped make this show a success. Our ratings are quite good. And if you're new to the show, I hope you'll enjoy it. We talk about politics. We've got to talk about the economy. We talk about finances, and we talk about how you can make more money with your investments and with your jobs. So it's an amazing thing. We've been doing the show now for over 2 years, and I want to first wish everyone a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year and Happy Holidays. This really is the best time of the year. So I don't know about you. I've got the Christmas spirit. Just the last few days, it's been so busy with all of the transition things, with Donald Trump getting into office. I hadn't really been thinking that much about Christmas, but now I'm just getting that Christmas spirit, and it's just a wonderful, joyful feeling. And I came down this morning, and my wife had a big sweater on, and it had a 3-letter message on that sweater, and it said joy. And speaking of joy, how about Donald Trump? You know, is he bringing joy to the country? It is so amazing how people are just so happy right now. The people are optimistic. They're feeling confident. They're ready to invest. They're ready to spend. They think good things are to come. And I wonder if you share that sentiment. I'll be taking your calls. By the way, unlike just about any other show that's on the air right now, almost any other radio show, it's almost all of the rest is just canned music or even worse, canned advertisements that people pay for. This is live. We are live and in color. And we do this show live most of the time, although sometimes we pre-record the show. But I always insist on doing the show live as often as we can. And sometimes for many reasons, we're not able to do it live. But I love to do it live because I love to hear from you. And I always say that we have the smartest radio audience in Radio Land. And I know that because I do take your calls. I've been doing it the last 3 or 4 weeks, and we get so many amazing ideas that come in from my listeners. So in the second hour, not the first hour, this is the 1 p.m. Eastern hour, we have some great guests coming up to talk about the economy and politics. But the second hour, most of the second hour, I will be taking your calls. And I want to hear from you. And the real question of the day is, what do you want Donald Trump to talk when he does his inauguration speech, which is coming up in a few weeks, actually? What do you want him to tell the American people? What should he say in his inauguration speech? I want him to sound a tone of patriotism and unity. Remember, by the way, Joe Biden exactly 4 years ago promised he was going to unify the country. And of course, he did exactly the opposite. He tore the country apart. He ran right to the 1-yard line on the football field on the liberal side. Never once, not once as president, ever reached out to people who were moderates or, God forbid, conservatives and asked them their opinion about things. And but Trump, boy, is this guy on a roll. I mean, it is amazing how one man can change the mood of the country. I made this point on Fox News this morning. I was on Fox and Friends, and I was saying, I can't stop smiling. I just cannot stop smiling since this election because I too am swept away by it. I think Trump, what happened on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange when you had hundreds of stock traders, stodgy old traders saying, chanting USA, USA, USA. I mean, that was an amazing moment that just brought a huge grin to my face, and I hope to yours too. So Trump is firing on all cylinders right now. And the most amazing thing, I find this to be so incredible is that Trump was elected 3 weeks ago, but he is not going to be inaugurated as, sworn in as president until January 20th. I believe it's Monday, January 20th. I'm almost sure that's the date. And so that's still 3.5 weeks from now. And yet it's almost as if he's the president today. I mean, has anybody seen Joe Biden? I mean, I haven't. He didn't go to France for the Notre Dame reopening. Jill was there, but Joe wasn't. Nobody knows where Joe is. Can you imagine, by the way? Can you imagine if Joe Biden had been elected to a second term? Can you? I mean, the guy. And look, I'm not trying to disparage older people. I'm getting old myself, but my God, he wouldn't have lasted 6 months. I mean, I wonder whether he's going to last these last few weeks. I mean, it's a dangerous situation that we have a president who is not in charge of his faculties. And again, I'm not demeaning people who get old. And, I'm 64 years old, so I'm not the same guy I was 20 years ago with respect to energy or my memory. But did we dodge a bullet here, didn't we? I mean, remember 4 months ago, Joe Biden's going to have a second term and he's in charge of his faculties. The media and the Biden people completely lied to the American people. And thank God we caught on to the fact that his faculties are not all there. But boy, Trump's are. I mean, this guy is running circles around everybody. There is a great cartoon, by the way, that we had in our hotline this week. And by the way, are you all getting the hotline? I hope you are. I mean, if you're not getting the Unleashed Prosperity hotline, why the hell not? It's free. It costs you nothing. It's a free email every morning, 5 mornings a week. It's read by all the VIPs in Washington. All the people at Fox News read it. All the people, many of the senators, congressmen read it. I know a lot of my friends going into high places in the Trump administration will be reading it. CEOs read it. You can read it 5 minutes every morning. It's just usually 5 or 6 bullet points with some charts and, that kind of thing. So get it, folks. Just sign up for it. And if you don't like it, you can just unsubscribe to it, but it is absolutely free. There's no advertising, by the way. It's just pure information. Newt Gingrich says it's the first thing he reads every morning. I know some of my friends who, work for Trump oftentimes, show him some of the things that we have in the hotline, and he uses them often. So you should have this information. It's a good way when you're arguing with your liberal friends to show them why they're so wrong about whatever issue it is. But it is an astonishing thing that we provide this to you for free. And to get the hotline, all you have to do is go to unleashprosperity.com. unleashprosperity.com. Sign up just give us your email. We'll send it to you. If you don't like it, so just unsubscribe. We'll stop sending it to you. But I think you really will like it. And it even if you're a Democrat or a liberal, I think you'll find the information very useful. But the reason I brought that up is we had a very funny cartoon. We always put a, kind of a humor item in the hotline every morning. And there's a cartoon of, the spaceship that comes down and it lands on Earth, and the alien gets out of the spaceship and rolls over to the gates of the White House. And who's there drinking a cup of coffee at the gates of the White House but Joe Biden. And the alien says to Joe Biden, "Take me to your leader." And Joe Biden says, "Oh, no, he's not here. He's over in Mar-a-Lago." Because it really is like Trump is the de facto president of the United States today. He is, by the way, I'm going to try to sneak out as soon as the show is over today and whip over to the FedEx field in Washington, D.C. to catch I'll probably get there right at the start of the second quarter of the big game today, the Army-Navy game. Donald Trump will be there. It's a great, it's just a day of really great football game. I think it'll be a great game because Army and Navy are both really good this year. But also it's a wonderful way to pay tribute to the cadets and the midshipmen. And so that will be a wonderful, wonderful thing. This year I'm voting. I normally root for Navy because I live in D.C. and Navy is out there in Annapolis, Maryland, right outside of D.C. But this year I have to say I'm rooting for Army because Army is, I think they're 11-1. 11 and what they have a spectacular season. And we haven't seen a season like this in 50 years for Army. And I'd love to see them end the season 12-1. And by the way, if they win today, I actually think they should be in the college football playoffs, but I won't get too bogged down on that. The one thing I want to mention before we take our first break and bring Steve DelBianco on, who's an expert on technology issues, is I wanted to mention a poll that we had in the hotline just the other day. And this one's really important, folks. The question was, do you think America should be a colorblind society, or do you believe we should have racial quotas and racial preferences to solve our racial problems? And I was so happy with these results. This was a poll that was sponsored by my friends at the Manhattan Institute. And what they found was, and I'm going to just read this to you because I want to be very precise here. The question is, which approach do you prefer for addressing racial inequality? And by the way, we all agree that there's race problems in the United States. Of course, we're not perfect people. But we're not a systemically racist country, but there are racial problems, absolutely. But the question was, which approach is best for addressing this racial inequality? And the choice number one was, we should focus on creating a race-conscious society to repair the harms of the past by developing policies that benefit marginalized groups, which is policies like preferences, or we should focus on creating a colorblind society where everyone is treated equally regardless of the color of their skin. And the results, and we got to take a break in 1 minute, but the results were amazing. 3 out of 4 Americans say we should focus on creating a colorblind society. By the way, some of my liberal friends think the term colorblind society is racist. I don't know why that's racist. It's a term that Martin Luther King used to use all the time. But 3 out of 4 Americans agree that we should be a colorblind society. We should not have racial preferences and quotas. So I'm proud of Americans for getting that right. I could not agree more. By the way, we are not a systemically racist country or the least racist country in the world. We're the first great multicultural society. We assimilate people. We're a melting pot. I love that about America. We'll be right back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
It's time to turn your daydream into your dream job. Wix gives you the power to turn your passion into a moneymaker with a website that fits your unique vision and drives you towards your goals. Let your ideas flow with AI tools that guide you, but give you full control and flexibility. Manage your business from one dashboard and keep it growing with built-in marketing features. Get everything you need to turn your part-time passion into a full-time business. Go to Wix.com.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC Talk Radio. By the way, if you're doing any Christmas shopping or holiday shopping this weekend, I know a great stocking stuffer, which would be my new book with Arthur Laffer. It is called The Trump Economic Miracle. Donald Trump wrote the foreword for the book, and it's about all the amazing things he's going to do for our economy. And so I think it's only like $14.95, $13.95. So it's a great little gift you might get your friends if they want to be educated about the economy. But one of the people I know who is an expert on the economy is my good friend, Steve DelBianco. Steve has been on the show many times. He is an expert on what is happening in the technology industry. Steve is the CEO of a trade group called Net Choice, and I'm a member of that because I love what they do. Steve, thanks so much for joining.
Hey, Steve, it's a pleasure to be here. And I'll bet Donald Trump has already read your book, right? So the second term
well,
is more miracle than the first.
I don't think he's read the book, but he's looked at the pictures. We have a lot of charts in there. And I showed him, I spent a whole afternoon with him. Oh, this was about 4 months ago. And we went over every single chart in that book, and he does love it. But thanks so much, Steve. So I've got so much I want to talk to you about. First of all, I find it so interesting. You know a lot of the leaders in the tech industry, and I find it very interesting. I was talking about this on the Larry Kudlow show earlier today, that so many of these big tech giants who used to or were purportedly hate, Republicans and conservatives, they're donating money to the, I see Zuckerberg and I see,
Bezos.
Bezos donating money to the Trump inauguration. What's going on here, Steve? Do you think that the technology companies are enemies of conservatives?
Yeah, tech companies love to follow the simple maxim of how do they please customers, grow their market share, and build a profitable business. That you can always rely on, right? Samuel Johnson once said that seldom is a man as innocently engaged as in the making of money. Because if you know that that's what they're about, their moves are entirely predictable. And I know.
By the way, Steve, these guys are sure good at it. I mean, it's amazing. I just bought, my wife and I bought NVIDIA about a year and a half ago, and we're just happy as clams right now. But it's incredible how successful these companies have become. We dominate, don't we, Steve, the technology world.
American companies, through innovation and aggressive expansion, have been able to dominate not just the hardware side of something like NVIDIA, Steve, but in terms of online services, ad-supported business models, social media, and cutting-edge artificial intelligence, or AI, that is really going to transform the way we use computing to drive economic productivity and economic growth. But the companies themselves, the Magnificent Seven that you talk about frequently as an economist, are driving equity values because they know how to monetize and build audiences, right? And the audiences are changing. In the last three trends to think about at this election. The electorate now includes young Americans, who don't watch network TV, right? 1 in 5 of the new Trump voters said that podcasts alone were their news source. And number 2, where do they come from? A lot of them come from conservatives with compelling messages. Ben Shapiro, Megyn Kelly, Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson. And their content, number 3, reaches people through social media. Social media is the way that you and I share our news and views on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, now X, Spotify, Rumble, Truth Social. And all of these social media platforms are privately owned and operated. And they pivot on a dime based on what the audience likes. So you well know this too. Go ahead. This summer, the Supreme Court, just this summer, ruled in the net choice case that our First Amendment here in America prevents the government from trying to tell Elon Musk what content he has to restrict or what content he has to allow. Right.
Yeah, thank God. Right.
Yeah.
That was an important Supreme Court decision. Your group, Net Choice, you were the plaintiffs in that case. Is that
That's right. That's right. And, and it shows that Elon Musk at X can decide overnight to change his content moderation policies. When it was Twitter, when he paid $40 billion for it, Twitter did a very strict content moderation on political topics. They didn't want political topics to generate controversy that would hurt their advertiser revenue. Elon Musk said, I'm going to change the name to X. I'm going to moderate content hardly at all. And he basically told his advertisers to go F themselves on national television because he doesn't want to rely on ad revenue. Now, that's a luxury that the richest man on the planet has, but it isn't the way things run over at Google, who runs YouTube, Meta, who runs Facebook and Instagram. Those companies do make their money through advertising. So advertisers they will discipline platforms like that to make sure that they don't show content that is so awful, even if it's lawful, that is so awful that it will turn off the audiences. So the good news is they're private platforms, and they can let young voters see what the young voters want to watch.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I think, it's interesting because I'm sure a lot of it, we have a fairly conservative audience, although we have Democrats and Republicans and liberals and conservatives. But I think mostly it's a fairly conservative audience on this radio station. So probably some of you listening might think, gee, why are we apologizing for big tech? I'm not apologizing for big tech. I'm simply, Steve and I are trying to tell you what is really going on with big tech. And thanks to you, Steve DelBianco, and your great group, Net Choice, I've had some really interesting meetings with the very high up people at some of these companies like Google and Meta and Apple. And I have to say, I'm very straightforward with them. I say, I'm a conservative. In the past, I haven't liked some of the decisions you've made. And you know what? They've genuinely, I think they're really coming around to saying, wait, we realize now we don't want to alienate half of our audience and half of our customers. And I think they're really changing their ways, Steve. I think they're seeing that, and I think they're seeing what happened with this election, that it's a pretty conservative country. But do you agree with me on that?
Yes, I do. And the individuals you meet are quick to say that there are news stories, there are headline-grabbing quips that occur at least once a week, where someone posting something rather provocative will feel as if YouTube wouldn't allow my video to surface in a search, or something I posted on Instagram or Facebook was restricted because it was offensive or violated their community standards. The companies have to do all this in an automated way. There's nobody out at headquarters who evaluates everything that I put into Instagram. It all gets posted, and only upon complaints or algorithmic catches does it get restricted in how it's shared. And when they do it, you can bet that mistakes will be made. And yet every mistake is an opportunity, well, to beat up big tech as if they have a ideological bent against conservatives. It isn't the case. It never has been, but mistakes are made. And when they are, the explanations are usually just too specific and detailed for people to want to listen to. On Election Day, there was a real clamor that Facebook and Google were surfacing searches for Harris that indicated a polling place. And that's because it was a search done by an individual who was sitting in Harris County, Georgia. And there's a Vance County, by the way, at the same time. So there are often some rather amusing explanations for what one might perceive as a systematic bias. But these companies, they're in the business of making money, making customers happy, and making advertisers anxious to spend money to reach them.
Well, you gave me some amazing statistics, Steve. I mean, one of the many reasons I wanted to have you on today, and they just blew me away about how conservatives have actually used social media more effectively in this campaign than Democrats did, and that you could even make a case that it was conservatives using social media in a very effective way, and Donald Trump did it incredibly well, which really brought, especially with young voters, because young voters really turned out for Trump because conservatives started to say, hey, we can use social media to advance our agenda.
Exactly. And it's done by commentators who attract an audience like Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan's podcast has been viewed, as of this morning, over 53 million times.
God, this is the podcast with Trump, right?
Exactly. His interview with Donald Trump, which occurred a few weeks before the election, was watched over 50 million times, even as of Election Day. And
hold on, Steve, let me just interrupt you for 1 second, because this is such an awesome statistic that you just 50 million people, folks. Now, I used to be a commentator for CNN. I did my penance but the average number of people watching CNN for any time, during the week is usually at most 500,000. So think of that, 500,000 versus 50 million.
Yeah, in the walk up to an election. And Steve, not all those watchers were necessarily 18-year-olds registered to vote. You can bet that a lot of them were younger Americans, 17, even 16-year-olds, and they're going to vote in the next election. And if they end up being attracted to content that's privately produced, like podcasts from Joe Rogan or Megyn Kelly, they're going to be able to enjoy that as they wish on social media. And even more importantly, they can share their views about what they watch on social media, because that's what attracts their friends and others to go take a peek. Go to minute 27 in the interview and listen to what Trump said about artificial intelligence, for example. We're sharing that with each other on social media, Steve, and that can't be done outside of social media. We can't ring a bell or hang up a sign on our neighbor's door to draw the attention the way we can with social media. It's a viral way of attracting news and views that are going to be more conservative and will change the fabric of the electorate.
So I'm talking to Steve DelBianco. He is the CEO of NetChoice, which is a pro-technology, pro-free speech, pro-America organization. And two quick issues I wanted to bring up to you and ask your thoughts about before we have to break, Steve. The first is, why in the world I mean, I just don't get this. Why in the world would the federal courts tell Google that they have to sell Chrome, which is one of their browsers? They've spent billions and billions of investment dollars on this, and the government's going to come along and say to one of our most successful companies, you have to sell off something that they spent so much money investing in? What the only people who are going to benefit from that are China.
Yeah, China and Microsoft, who are the ones who instigated this case to begin with. Steve, and I read a report that you and your group, the Committee to Unleash Prosperity, put out. And you described what an unmitigated disaster it is for American consumers and for American innovation. If a judge pulls a knife and fork out and decides to slice up one of America's most valuable companies to fit his vision of the way a tech company should be run, suggesting that if Google has a good search engine, and I think you might agree they do, that he says Google shouldn't also be allowed to own the browser called Chrome that many of us use on our Android phones and our laptops. So it had nothing to do with the case. The case that gave rise to this was about whether Google search was so much better than everyone's search engine that Google shouldn't be able to lock in deals with folks like Apple to make Google search the default on your brand new iPhone. And if that's the problem, well, then just don't do those deals anymore. It just made no sense, as you said in your report, for a judge who knows nothing about the tech industry to decide how to carve up companies.
Yeah. No, Steve, you're exactly right. And thank God we have NetChoice. You guys do an amazing job. And folks, we, as I know many of our listeners are conservatives, we are able to use these social media platforms and the search engines to advance our causes. And I think we will continue to do that, because I do think in this last election, it was actually the social media, these new forms of communicating with people, that actually handed Donald Trump the election. So I'm tired of people saying, oh, social media is all against Donald Trump, because they're not.
Trump
Steve DelBianco, thanks so much for joining. Folks, we got to take a break. We'll be right back. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC. By the way, in the second hour of the show, I will be taking your calls on the More Money Show, 1-800-848-9222, because we are live and in color. And now I get to turn to two of my favorite people in the whole world, who I so greatly respect. I've worked with both of them. David Asman is, of course, you will know David Asman for years of being with Fox News. He also served many years as an editor at the Wall Street Journal editorial page, as I did, although, David, I don't think you and I ever overlapped. And then, of course, Trish Regan, who you all know, Trish Regan. She was also at Fox News. She was many years at CNBC. She was at Bloomberg. She's done it all in the business media. She has a new, what is it, Trish? It's the Trish Regan Show?
It's the Trish Regan Show every day, live, Monday through Friday on YouTube.
And I've been really privileged to go on
the whole bit.
Well, Merry Christmas to both of you. Thanks so much for joining on a Saturday afternoon. Trish, let me start with you. I just think Donald Trump is on the most amazing roll right now. It's almost as if, he's not going to be sworn in as president for another, 3-4 weeks. And yet I think it's almost like he is president right now, because no Lord knows where Joe Biden is. But have you ever seen anything like this?
No, I haven't. I'm the most optimistic, most excited I've ever been in my entire life. And let me just say, by the way, it's wonderful to be here today with both of you. I love David. We had a wonderful time when we worked at Fox together, and respect him so much, as I do you. So it's a good crowd you got. But let me just say, listen, this is exciting. We are on the cusp of so much. This is a different Trump administration, in my view, because when he first went in, he had to deal with a lot of baggage. This time, it's a mandate, Steve. And that mandate is to get the economy roaring again. And he knows exactly how to do that. He gets very good advice from you, of course. And, I've always said it's not that hard, and yet it is, right? Because for whatever reason, the Biden administration just wasn't able to pull it together, nor was the Obama administration. And so Trump really delivered. And prior to COVID, we just had massive growth, 6.6 million jobs being added to the economy, tremendous growth. Even when you go back and you look at real wages, for example, prior to that March 2020, we had grown the most since the 1950s, adjusted for inflation. Now, we need to get back to that and then some. And he knows how to do it. He's got the right people around him to do it. And it's going to happen. So, yes, this is the most excited I've ever been. And I was excited going into this election because you could just feel the momentum and you could see it in the markets.
Well, that's a great point. I haven't been able to stop smiling either since the election, David Asman. But I was especially smiling, David, because you've been covering business news for decades. But have you ever seen anything like what happened on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange when Trump showed up?
Oh my God, that was fabulous. I mean, even those, not everybody that was on the floor cheering him on were Trump supporters during the entire campaign. I would venture most were, but some weren't. But even those who weren't now are so enthusiastic because the positivity and the faith for the future now is so strong. What Trish said was absolutely true, and it's felt by people, again, not just the solid Trump supporters, but a lot of people who were either on the fence or some who probably didn't even vote for him are now feeling that positivity. We now know better than during the campaign itself that this was a campaign of positivity and faith and confidence in the future versus fear. The fear that the Democrats were offering started way back in the pandemic when, of course, they used the real fear of getting sick and dying to just grab more power. And then, of course, the fear of the climate change and the fear of greedy corporations and the fear of tax cuts. And all of those fears. I mean, I understand a lot of people died in the pandemic and maybe there's something to climate change, but their attempt to use fear to govern is something that nobody wants now, looking back at it, and that those people who were against Trump because they feared him realized that fear was misplaced. It was just being used by people who wanted more power. Now, I will throw a little monkey wrench. I don't know if you want to get into it right now, but a lot of Republicans are now ironically using fear to try to prevent an immediate extension of the tax cuts, which did so much to propel the economy from 2017 to now. Even during the Biden administration, one reason the economy didn't collapse more than it did through inflation and other means is because we had the Trump tax code, and that was still generating wealth and generating new creation of businesses and new wealth creation itself. If we allow those tax cuts to expire in 2025, which they will at the end of 2025, and a lot of Republicans are suggesting that it's somehow not important that we prioritize the extension of those tax cuts, that could really throw a monkey wrench into all the joy that we're now feeling.
It's craziness. I agree with you, David. And you were the first one who warned me about this. And that was about 4 or 5 days ago. And I don't understand the logic of this, Trish. Everything David said was true about the tax cut. And now we got these crazy people saying, it's going to cost $4.5 trillion over the next decade to extend the tax cut, when in fact, there was no revenue loss from it because, as David said, it grew the economy, got more people working. Exactly. But here's my point about this, Trish.
The economy, the most we had seen in some time. I mean, it was really a tremendous boom, and we need that, and it's got to go through. And I would hate to see that derailed in any way because it's part of this momentum. David's absolutely right.
That's right. And so my point would be, and I'd like your reaction to this. I mean, Donald Trump has an incredible amount of political capital right now. He's as popular as he's ever been. The American people are rooting for him. David's right. Even I have family members, David and Trish, who wouldn't even talk to me when Trump won in 2016. They were so angry about it. But now even they're saying, well, maybe Trump could do some really good things for the country. So people are kind of coming around to him. My point is, he's got the political capital right now. Let's use that political capital to get this agenda done. Why wait? And
I think he will. I mean, he is not the kind, right, to to sit on his hands. He's not going to wait. You see him already with his talk of tariffs to try and influence Mexico and Canada on the border front. He is ready, willing, and able to get right to work, and he's not going to let any dust settle. So the challenge, you're going to still, right now, he's got to get his appointments through. He's got to get his cabinet picks through. He's got to get everybody on board. You need the Republican Party to be united. But this should not be hard. The tax cuts need to continue. And you know what? We need some more of them. We need, bring it on. And I'm not, don't get me wrong. We don't want a repeat of what we saw in the UK. But there are things that can be done to make all this work. And part of this is just getting this growth going. The one thing that I'm a little worried about, the caveat, is that you got Jerome Powell, who's never met, an interest rate cut he didn't want to welcome. Right. And I think a lot of the money printing that went on, I couldn't believe it really at the time. Biden was, and he put the third stimmy check out there all alongside the House, moving forward with tons of spending while Powell did the same thing. So the challenge now for Donald Trump, I know he loves low interest rates, but think of this momentum. Think of the confidence. Think of how that inspires more confidence. That inspires growth. And so consequently, if you are running up against a Fed that's overly aggressive, right, and leaves these interest rates really low like they like to do, I do worry about that. I mean, that's one thing I'll just throw out there.
Yeah.
Right?
Look,
because they like to print.
Yeah. Look, Trish, you're right. I mean, we just had a tick up of inflation. We're not at the 2% target. We've been consistently above it now for 3 or 4 years. So I don't understand the logic of continuing. And, Trump likes low interest rates. I like low interest rates. We all do. But you've got to make sure you don't have a recurrence of inflation, which is what Jerome Powell gave us. But by the way, that's Trish Regan, who is, among many, many other things, is the host of the Trish Regan Show. And by the way, Trish, I think I'm coming on your show next week, right?
On Monday, 12:30 live. Steve Moore.
I cannot
We're
wait.
Talk about all this some more.
That's great. Well, this is so fun for me because normally it's David Asman and Trish Regan interviewing me, and now I get to grill them. But David, get back to the tax cut, if I may. You and I have been in this business a long time, decades. And one of the frustrations we both had over all these years is something called static revenue analysis. And that is where they say, a tax bill is going to cost, X billion or trillion dollars, but they never take into account the fact that the economy grows. As Arthur Laffer taught us, when you cut tax rates, you get more people working and so on, you get more revenue. And here we are. Republicans are going to have the presidency. They're going to have the House. They're going to have the Senate. Why do we have to put up with these people that are always wrong, that are telling us, that extending the Trump tax cut is going to cost us all this money? I want to get rid of those people, David, and I want to use real world analysis of these bills.
Right. Well, by the way, there's one person who could override all of their objections, and you know who that is. And the key is what Donald Trump decides, whether the promises that he's one who says the promises made are promises kept. He stuck to it in his first term, and I really believe he's going to stick to it in his second term. And his promises had a lot to do with tax cuts, and of course one of which Kamala Harris copied and tried to use on her own campaign. Of course, nobody believed her, but they believe Donald Trump because they know he followed through on his promises in 2016, and he's got to do it this time. As I don't want to get too into politics, but the bottom line is that Senator McConnell and a lot of the state senators and members of Congress as well, House members, just have never really had that positive, energetic view of the economy that supply-siders do, that Donald Trump glommed onto because he's a businessman and he understands the economy from a businessman's perspective, not from a political perspective. Politicians always want to control the economy, whether they're Democrats or Republicans. I've seen it, and I grew up in D.C., you work in D.C., I've seen it firsthand. I mean, once you get inside the Beltway, once you become sort of a part of that Beltway culture, you forget that it is they're not the creators. All they do is sort of rehash what the private sector actually does. Donald Trump has known that from the beginning because he's actually built stuff, and he dealt with politicians trying to prevent him from building stuff. So he wants to get that garbage out of the way. Now, that garbage includes a lot of people with the old mentality. Now, Senator McConnell is not going to be the Senate leader anymore, the Republicans in the whole Senate. It's going to be Thune, but the question is how much Thune is still kind of stuck in that old way of thinking. And Donald Trump's got to shake it out of him. And it's not just the Senate. I mean, you know, there are members of the House, too. Chip Roy last week tried to convince me that the tax cuts extension was going to cost, to your word, it was going to cost $5 trillion. Just reminding your listeners here that since 2017, tax revenues have increased $1.5 trillion. That's a 48% increase in tax revenue because there was more revenue and growth generated by those tax cuts. The same could happen again. They're not going to cost $5 trillion. They're going to bring in more revenue. And that's
so I agree with that, David.
Go ahead, Trish. I think it's very alarming, and it's alarming that Chip Roy told you that, David. And I think we all, you know, all of us doing what we can in our own different ways need to get in front of this, because the reason he was elected was to solve, I mean, a lot of problems, right? But one of the main ones consistently was this horrific economy that we've just been dealt for the last 4 years. Nobody wants it anymore. So it's really critical for the conservative movement. And I love what David's saying about the optimism. It really feels like Reagan 2.0, if you would, that sort of, you know, that excitement that can come in. And it's funny because, you know, Art Laffer in some ways is getting a do-over this many years later. There's a chance to really grow all this and the policies that, you know, Art believes in and you believe in and we all kind of are rooted in. This can happen, but not if these other folks are out there in the way. And I think it's a little bit of selfishness. I think they're trying to get something, right? Okay, well, I'll vote this way if you do this for me. So everybody's out there with their own self-interest. And it's time for that to end. We need to put the country first and the country's economy first.
That's Trish Regan, and Trish is exactly right on that. And David, the other thing that's kind of annoying to me, and we've only got a couple minutes left before we have to take a hard break, but this idea that a number of Republicans are saying they want to keep the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which I called the Green New Deal bill. I mean, what's going on there, David? I mean, none of that stuff paid off. It was just a big boondoggle. I call it green pork. And we got Republicans saying, oh, no, keep all these Biden programs.
Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy. Well, remember the CHIPS Act, that $280 billion bit of corporate welfare. Welfare of any kind is a problem, but corporate welfare is the worst. When you ask the middle class to pay off billions of dollars to companies like Intel who aren't doing so well and think that will make things work. You know, there were over a dozen Republicans who voted for it in the Senate. I remember one of whom called me a stooge of the Chinese Communist government because I was against it. And I said, what? But the bottom line is that they really, a lot of them really believe in this government directed economic stuff that was melded into not only the Inflation Reduction Act, the horribly named Inflation Reduction Act, but also the CHIPS Act and a lot of other things. So that, to Chip Roy's benefit, he was saying we got to get rid of the Inflation Reduction Act because there's just so much garbage in there. It's irredeemable. And so he's not, I don't want to dump too much on him, but what he's saying, by the way,
we got to bring this to a close. We're up on a hard break, but
right. So much to
David Asman and Trish Regan, you guys are the best. Thank you so much. I owe you both. And thank you for being such a great voice every day for economic freedom. Folks, this is the More Money Show on WABC now.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. This is our second hour. We are on 2 hours every Saturday afternoon from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. following the Larry Kudlow Show. This is the number one talk radio station and network in the country, WABC. I know many people listening to the show are on some of our affiliates. Thank you so much for taking some time out on your Saturday afternoon to be to participate in the show. And by the way, most of this hour, I will be taking your calls. I've got a couple of questions that I want to ask your advice on. One of them is, what do you see Trump doing when he gives his inauguration speech? What is the most important message you want to hear from Donald Trump? I want him to do what Joe Biden said he would do, but never did, which is I want to see Trump try to unify the country. And so far, by the way, he's done an amazing job of it. Trump has a high approval rating. He's pressing all the right buttons. I was just in the break. I picked up my weekend Wall Street Journal. And by the way, I hope everyone does read the Wall Street Journal, especially the editorial board. I was privileged to work 10 years on the Wall Street Journal editorial board. And by the way, you need to read the Wall Street Journal editorial board, and you have to read the Unleashed Prosperity Hotline. And if you do those two things, you can get the Unleashed Prosperity Hotline. Just go to unleashedprosperity.com and we will send it to you for free every morning. But a great piece in the Wall Street Journal today by none other than Peggy Noonan. And I think Peggy Noonan is a great writer. Sometimes I agree with her, sometimes I don't, but I think she's always got interesting perspectives. And the title of her piece today in the Wall Street Journal is "Biden Gets Lost in Trump's Shadow." And it is so true. I mean, maybe Biden should just abdicate the throne. Why doesn't he just resign and let Trump take over right now? Because Trump is the de facto president. It's the most amazing thing. I've been in politics for 40 years. I've never seen anything like this. But Joe Biden, anybody seen Joe Biden? We see Jill. I don't know where Joe is. Jill went to Paris with Donald Trump, but Joe was nowhere to be seen. That was for the reopening of Notre Dame Cathedral. But Trump is doing all sorts of things. He's all over the place. He will be at the Army-Navy game this afternoon. I do not believe Joe Biden is going to that game, but Trump loves that because he's a great patriot. He believes in our military. But it is a sight to behold. And I want to ask you all about, what do you think about this? I mean, can you imagine if Joe Biden had been reelected president? I mean, remember 4 or 5 months ago, we thought he might be 4 more years of that. So speaking of 4 more years, and by the way, I know Eduardo and Bernie are holding on, and we will be taking your calls shortly. By the way, that number is 1-800-848-9222. We are live, by the way. We are live. Most of the radio shows on the weekend are just canned or even just canned advertisements, but we are live, and I love to hear from you, and I want to hear from you. And by the way, I want to hear from Democrats. I really do. I want to hear from Democrats. If you're a Democrat, you hate Trump, I want to hear from you. If you're a Democrat and you're open-minded to Trump, I want to hear from you. I especially appreciate it, by the way, when women call in, because I love women, but also because women bring a totally different perspective. And most of the callers who call in are men. So I love to hear from the ladies. So that is my agenda for this afternoon. But I wanted to bring to your attention, before I get to the callers, this amazing thing about Biden's farewell. Because by the way, he's trying to say that he's handing off a healthy economy, but I don't see it being a healthy economy given how high prices are to everything. But here is something for you to think about. Here is what has happened in the last 4 years under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And thankfully, it will all end in a few weeks. But these are the increases per household. For every household in America, here is what's happened. This is stunning. Per household increases since 2021 in government spending, $36,000. $36,000. I don't know, folks, have you gotten $36,000 of additional government services under Trump? I don't see it. Here's another one. Taxes up $17,100 for every household in America. $17,000 of higher taxes we're paying because of these government programs. And then the other one is the debt. The debt per household has gone up another $29,700, almost just shy of $30,000. How in the world is this a success? How can Joe Biden say, "Oh, I'm handing off to to Donald Trump, a healthy economy. Healthy? What planet are these people living on? You've got prices 25% more expensive than they were 4 years ago. You've got this, $7 trillion increase in the national debt. We're running $2 trillion deficits. People's incomes have fallen, and Biden's living in la la land, saying that he has fixed these problems. He has not. He has not. These are ungodly bad numbers, and the other thing I wanted to mention that, and this is in our hotline from Thursday, and I'm kind of repeating some of these things because they're and I'm not trying to depress people. I'm in a very good mood, but there are problems out there. And here's another one. The education gap widens. In other words, kids with, high income parents who go to great schools because, they can afford to, they're doing just fine in terms of their student performance level. But what happens is the students at the bottom are the ones whose test scores and graduation rates have fallen the most. So in other words, this is the most regressive tax we've ever seen in this country, where we're hurting the people at the bottom. And one reason that these test scores are so bad is because of COVID and because of these stupid lockdowns imposed on our schools by the teachers' unions, which kept kids out of school for anywhere from 6 to 18 months. Craziness. And the people were, look, if you were a kid of a rich parents, you had a tutor or you had some other alternative. You could send your kids to a private school. You could, a lot of parents had pods where they take a group of kids in and they teach them when the schools were closed down. Low-income parents and low-income kids did not have that opportunity, and they've fallen further and further behind. Now, this is an example, folks, of how liberal policies hurt the people that they say they care the most about. They say they care about, the poorest among us, but they don't, because their policies hurt the poorest among us. And there's no better example of that than what's happened to test scores, because this is really, really depressing when you have kids, 15, 14, 12 years old, and their test scores are falling, especially if they're, from poor households. Why not give every single child in America a voucher? Give them a $15,000, $20,000 voucher. We're spending $80 billion at the federal level. Just voucherize the money. And any child, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, let the parents choose a school that works for their kids. And we as taxpayers will pay the tuition for that. And then, failed public schools, we can shut down. If a school is failing, we should shut it down. I really believe that. So those are my views on these things. Before we take our first break, is Mr. Producer, is Eduardo still on?
Yes.
Eduardo, hello.
Stephen, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you. Thanks so much for calling in. I apologize for keeping you on hold, but what do you got for us today,
not
sir?
At all. Well, let me bring up some domestic and foreign. So 22% of people's full paycheck to pay a rent. Inflation 2 months in a row going up. France is 6% of GDP debt. Even Japan is over 2% in inflation. This is going to be a worldwide recession, possibly next year.
Wait, let me explain. Let me understand why you think there will be a recession.
I just think we're just paying too much on these prices worldwide.
Yeah, the
because
prices.
of the Ukraine and COVID, post-COVID.
Yes.
All that is contributing to this.
Eduardo, let me ask you a question before I let you go. And great point. Sure. What do you think, Eduardo, of what Elon Musk is doing with this government efficiency? Do you think we can find savings?
Oh, my God. Yeah. I'm from Chicago.
Right.
Yeah. You can find waste just going by New York, Chicago, L.A. Yep. Oh, my goodness.
Yes.
And those are just 3 cities.
Yeah, those are the 3 cities that are, Eduardo, great call. Thanks so much for calling in.
Yep.
But I could not agree more. I mean, these cities, by the way, so what's happened, I have a son who lives out in California. What's happened in San Francisco and Los Angeles is just awful. I mean, more so San Francisco. It's become an unlivable city. Look, we're finally seeing some improvement in New York, but it's still a mess. Look what's happening in my home city of Chicago. It's terrible. There was a big article in the Wall Street Journal about how people are selling all the real estate in Chicago. Nobody wants to live there because of terrible schools, terrible crime, terrible graffiti. All of the problems of progressive governance have come down and bitten us in the you-know-what, and that is why we need a change of leadership in this country. Okay, we are up against a break. When I get back, I'll take more of your calls. And by the way, I would love you all to tell me too, if you would, what your favorite Christmas movie is. So tell me what you think Trump should do, but also what's your favorite Christmas movie? And at the end of the show, I will tell you what mine is. The number to call in for the More Money Hotline is 1-800-848-9222. We will be getting to all your calls. I am told that there are 2 lines still open for people who want to call in. This is the More Money Show on WABC, and I hope everybody's having a wonderful Christmas season and happy holidays to everyone.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Hello, folks. This is Steve Moore. We're back. This is the best time of the year. I hope everybody's having a wonderful holiday season. I just the last few days, I've started finally getting into the holiday, spirit. I've been so busy at work. We're helping with Donald Trump with the transition. It's an exciting time. I've been so absorbed with the politics and the policy stuff. I haven't really been able to enjoy the Christmas season, but last night went out to a wonderful concert, high school concert, and the kids were awesome. And they played all the wonderful, my favorite songs. And I don't like the, the non-secular songs, the, Little Drummer Boy and that kind of stuff. But I love the, songs like Oh Holy Night and Silent Night and the First Noel, and they just did an amazing job. I love that. So, by the way, if you haven't gotten out and listened to some great Christmas music or, gone to see some of the concerts, go do it. It's just so uplifting. I walked out of that concert, and frankly, some of these kids aren't the greatest, singers, and so they're not the greatest musicians, but they tried, and they were smiling, and they were happy, and it made me happy. So, if you get a chance to go out and just enjoy the Christmas season, I find that to be a wonderful thing to do. Incidentally, we are taking callers this afternoon. We're live, by the way, folks. We're live here in color, and that makes me. I love it because I love hearing from you all, and I'm looking at our switchboard, and it's lighted up. So thank you, folks, for calling in. I just really enjoy talking to you. But before I get to Bernie, who I know has been very patiently holding on. I just want to say something about Jeff Bezos and Zuckerberg, both of them. Bezos, as you know, was the founder of Amazon, and Zuckerberg was the founder of Meta and Facebook. And these guys have been pretty liberal. They've been attacking Republicans and conservatives. And now listen to them. I mean, Bezos and Zuckerberg are giving $1 million to the inauguration, which I think is fantastic. And Jeff Bezos, here, I'm just going to quote Jeff Bezos. He said, "We need a growth orientation in this country." Boy, that sounds like what we've been saying every week on this show, on the More Money Show. Yes, we need a growth orientation in this country. He said we have to remove regulatory barriers. Where have you heard that before? I've been saying that. Trump has been saying that. And then here's the quote from Bezos. He said, "I'm very hopeful that Trump seems to have a lot of energy around reducing regulation. And my point of view is if I can help him do that, I'm going to help him because we do have too much regulation in this country." Boy, that's fantastic. I couldn't agree. And then listen to this. He said, if you look at the national debt, this is Jeff Bezos, by the way, if you look at the national debt and how gigantic it is as a proportion of GDP, these are real long-term problems. And the way we get out of them is by outgrowing them. Use growth. I love this. You're going to solve the problem of the national debt by making it a smaller percentage of GDP. You have to grow the denominator, and that means you have to grow GDP at, 3, 4, or 5% a year. That's Jeff Bezos. Boy, it's fantastic stuff. And he used to not talk like that, but I think Donald Trump is changing the way we all look at the world. Okay, so I wanted to tell you that. Shifting gears, let's go over to Bernie, who is on line 3. Mr. Producer, do we have Bernie still on?
Yes.
Bernie, the microphone is yours.
Hello, Mr. Moore. It's a pleasure to talk to you. I agree with President Trump. being awarded Time Magazine's Person of the Year.
Yes, that was amazing.
Yeah, but I think the runner-up should be Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel. Yep. Israel is a tiny country. It largely defeated Hamas. It largely defeated Hezbollah. And it's made Iran wary of attacking because Israel might destroy it also. We have to remember that under Netanyahu, Israel avenged the killing of 200 American Marines that Regan couldn't avenge.
Yes, I remember that.
Netanyahu avenged them this year.
Yep.
This year. So that's all I wanted to say. Can I add one practical, maybe? There's a movie that was made many years ago, which is largely forgotten now. It was called Gentleman's Agreement with Gregory Peck. It was the first movie made about anti-Semitism. It was directed by, I forget his name, but it was written by Morse Hart. And it won the Academy Award for Best Picture.
All right, well, Bernie, I got to run, Bernie. But I'm going to look that one up. But Gentleman's Agreement, I've heard of that movie, but I've never seen it. But I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to have to watch that on Netflix one of these nights coming up. Okay, let's quickly go to Al before we have to take a break. Al, what have you got for us?
Hey, Mr. Moore, happy holidays, and I love your show. It's active, it's dynamic, it's fresh, and it's always on.
Thank you so much.
And I could say Kamala who? Listen,
yeah, right.
Yep.
Amazing.
That DOJ committee, what Trump has is every president has a little chance to make something happen. You know, they're usually known for one little thing or two, right?
Yep.
What Trump did, the last bit, right? Did the taxes, did everything. Now, what has he got? Social Security is going to take the taxes away. The tips, okay? And all these things are going to be great, great, great. But with the Doge, if I may, I don't know if I have time. Could I just say something real quick?
Just give us one idea, if you wouldn't mind, Al, about what you think Doge should do.
Okay, let's say this. For all the amount of money we're spending on homeless and vets, let's give them an opportunity on the 50% of federal lands that are available.
Yes.
Guess what?
Yes.
Make $10,000 prefab homes, one after the other.
I like
give them a chance. It come from their benefits or for what we spent for homelessness. Guess what? Everybody wants a place, and guess what? They'll all move out.
They do.
And on that base, where all these thousands of homes are, like they did in Hicksville or Levittown, guess what?
Yep.
They have job services. They have recruitment for things, and they can all put some skin in the game by helping maintain or paint and stuff like that. Yeah. Guess what? You don't have to have San Francisco ruined. You could return it to its former beauty. All these things are crying out.
Yeah. Al, it's a great, I got to cut you off. It's a great, thank you for calling. Really great call. And I got to tell you, Donald Trump is talking about something exactly like that we use some of the federal lands. By the way, the rest of the Mississippi, almost half the land is owned by the government. Most of it is not environmentally sensitive. And that land could be used for building houses and cutting the cost of home ownership because it's so darn expensive right now to buy a home. I know that. I've got 3 young sons and they want to buy a house. They just cannot afford it. Before we take our break, let's try to squeeze. Is Danny still on?
Yes.
Danny.
Hey, how you doing there, Steve? Great show as always. I was turned on to you by my father a generation ago. My dad loved you and Larry.
Wait a minute. Hold on. I'm not that old. I mean, I guess I am getting old, but it's very nice for you to say. Danny, where do you live?
Long Island.
Long Island. Okay. What do you got for us? So we got just 2 minutes before we got to take a break, but tell us what's on your mind. How can we save money? What's your advice to Donald J. Trump?
Well, the first and most important thing Trump needs to do for this country has nothing to do with me because I'm at the end of my road here working is lower the corporate taxes, get companies to come back and bring these solid middle-class jobs back to the middle of the country.
Yes.
End the tax. You put money in people's pockets. You stop taking taxes on tips. You lower taxes on Social Security. You put money. You grow the economy. People have money to spend, not the government. Smart. That's the key. I know how to spend money. You know, you give me an extra $100 a week and I go out to dinner with my wife somewhere. That's going into somebody's pocket. That money gets spent 5 times. That's the way you grow the economy. That's what we need to do. Get the government out of our pockets. Everything else falls into place after that.
Well put. Excellent. Danny, I appreciate your call. I could not say it better. I think you're exactly right. I think we have to start selling assets off and raising money for that. And I think the other thing we need to do is be looking at programs that have been around for years and years and years where nobody really knows what they do. And seriously, there are programs in the Department of Labor, Department of Interior, this program, that, where nobody knows what they do. You've only got 10% of federal workers coming in full time. If they're not going to work, I'm with Elon Musk on this. If people aren't going to come into work, then they should be fired. And they can sit home if they want, but they shouldn't be getting a taxpayer funded paycheck for that kind of thing. And it really is important because I'm all in favor of government programs that work, if they work, but so many of them don't work. And when they don't work, I mean, this is so amazing. I mean, Milton Friedman used to tell me this, folks, that when you have a program that does work, and most government programs don't work, but when you have one that does work, all the people want to say, oh, this program works, so we have to give it more money, right? Because it's working. So if it works, give it more money. But then if they've got a program that doesn't work, like the Department of Education, which has spent, $500 billion over the last 25 years, and it has had no impact on, kids' success in the classroom with respect to test scores or graduation rates. So the program isn't working. And what do people say about, oh, well, the reason it isn't working is we're not spending enough money, so we have to give it more money. So if the program is working, we have to give it money. And if it's not working, we have to give it more money, because the solution to everything, as Milton Friedman used to say, disparagingly, is that Washington's solution to every problem is to spend more money. And before I take this break, I can leave you with this statistic because it just blows me away. Before COVID, the budget in Washington was roughly $5 trillion. That's a lot of money, $5 trillion. So then we have COVID, and we spent boatloads of money on COVID, trillions of dollars. And here's what happened. They never lowered the spending, folks, after they spent all that money on COVID. And so here we are, 4 years after COVID, and we've built all this programming into the budget. So we're spending $7 trillion now. So think about that. In other words, what my friend Rand Paul, who's a senator from Kentucky, he's one of my favorite senators, says is all we have to do if we want to balance the budget is just go back to spending what we were spending before COVID had hit. Just go back to that level of spending, which was still an obese budget, and then we don't have a deficit. So this isn't that hard, folks. So I'm going to take more calls because these are exciting ideas that I'm hearing from you. This is the More Money Show on WABC. Don't forget, later today is the Army-Navy game, which is, an exciting one today. And by the way, this is an especially good Army-Navy game because both teams are really good this year. Army is, I think, 10-1, and Navy, I think, has only lost 2 games. So it's going to be an amazing thing. Donald Trump will be there. So if you can't be there, and I'm going to try to race out there after I'm done with the show because the game's starting soon. But if you can't go, watch it on TV because Trump will be there. It's really patriotic. It just makes you think red, white, and blue when you watch that game. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
We're back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC. We're having a lot of fun this afternoon. We're on, by the way, every Saturday afternoon from 1 to 3 p.m. I want to do a quick shout out to my good friend and someone who really is the one who allowed me to do the show, took a real chance on me 4 or 5 years ago. How long have I been doing this? I think 4 or 5 years. And it's been so fun. I really enjoyed this so much. It's the highlight of my week to be in front of this microphone and talk to you, but also listen to you and listen to what you have to say. It makes me a better analyst. It really does when I hear what folks with real jobs, real people outside the Beltway are saying about the problems with America. Because I'm inside the Beltway. I'm a swamp creature. I admit it. And I learn so much when I hear from people who are not in the swamp about what's wrong with the swamp. We need to drain the swamp because it is way too big. I live in suburban Maryland, outside of D.C. 3 of the 4 wealthiest counties in the United States are in or around Washington, D.C. In other words, we're getting rich off you people. I mean, I don't understand why New Yorkers and people in New Jersey and Connecticut and Rhode Island and all these states want to send all this money to Washington. The only people that benefits is us. You send us $1, folks, and we send you 80 cents back. Does that make any sense? We need to get back to the states doing their own projects, programs. Don't send money to Washington. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, what. All you're doing is creating this big blob bureaucracy in Washington that is about 3 times bigger than it has to be. It's amazing. If you look at, I wrote a book about 3 or 4 years ago called Govzilla. And, you can pick it up on Amazon if you want to get it. It's a short book, but it just looks at how much government spending and government regulation, government taxes, and government ownership of assets. It goes up and up and up and up and up every year. For most of our history as a country, the federal government never spent more than, say, 10% of our gross domestic product. And now it's spending 25 or 30% of our domestic product. Under COVID, we were spending 40 to 50% of our entire output on government. The government is obese. It's too big. We've got to shrink it and pay our bills. Okay, so my good friend Lisa, this is so funny. I've always said that, I love taking your calls and I love my listeners, but I don't get enough of the ladies who call in. I mean, it's just my frustration. And we got a lot of men with really great ideas, and I appreciate all of them calling in. But I always beg the women to call in. So we have one woman out of the 20 people who are calling in right now who is a woman, and that is Lisa. So, Lisa, thank you so much for calling in today.
I don't know if I feel special or not.
Yeah, you should.
Okay, all right.
Where do you live? Where are you, Lisa?
I'm in Nutley, New Jersey. I'm one of Dominic's callers. We did a book signing for Dominic Carter when he had his book a few weeks ago.
Oh, fantastic.
Here's my question.
Yes.
Every day, midday and nighttime, people go out and they play the lottery in every state. Yes. Anything over $600, we have to fill out a form, and the government takes their share.
Yep.
This money was supposed to go to the schools to fix up our schools, and you were talking about schools.
Yes.
Then it was supposed to go to infrastructure. Where is all of this money that they are taking going? Because it's disappearing. And then in New Jersey, they used to have the cash 5 for $1.
Yeah.
Now it's $2. Explain to me where all this money is going, and why can we not use all this money to fix up our schools, which is what it was intended for, our infrastructure, and sending kids to a perfect school without us having our taxes raised every year, and I don't have kids.
Well, Lisa, great call. Thank you so much for calling in. It's a great question. I don't know. I'm going to have to ask some of my callers who live in New Jersey because it's tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars they collect from these lotteries. And by the way, it's mostly low-income people who are buying these lottery tickets. And you're right, Lisa. They say, we're going to have the lottery. We're going to use the money to fix the schools. Have they fixed the schools in New Jersey? No. If they fixed the schools in New York? No. If they fixed the schools in low-income areas in Connecticut? No. So you raise a good question. We raise all this money. Where does it go? It goes to the bureaucracy. It goes to the blob, but it does not help our children. Great point. Lisa, thank you so much. Okay, let's turn to Tom. Are you there, Tom? Hi.
Yeah. My favorite Christmas movie is Gene Shepherd's A Christmas Story.
Oh, that's a great one.
That movie and makes a cameo appearance in the end. And
who does? Wait, I'm sorry. Hold on. Who makes a cameo at the end?
Gene Shepherd himself.
Oh, really? I was not aware of that.
Yeah. The part where they go to this bargain store waiting to see Santa Claus, and this distinguished looking man tells Ralphie that he's line jumping.
Well, that is a cute story. I'm going to have to rewatch that to see if I got what do you have for us? How are we going to save some money in Washington?
I don't know. I'm just talking about Christmas. And I'd like to say one thing you may not know.
Yes.
Hollywood has made over 400 Christmas movies, and there's not one mention of our dear Lord Jesus Christ.
You know what? That's a really good point. You know what they're doing? They're taking the Christ out of Christmas, and I hate that. I think it's a really good point. I don't understand that, and I really don't. And it's a very good point. Thank you so much for calling in, Tom. I guess, do we have Dino?
Yes.
Yes.
Dino.
Hello, Steve.
Hi, Dino. How are you?
I'm all right. Thank you for taking my call, Steve. I got a question for you. With Social Security, back I get SSI because I got injured and I was not getting much, but it was in the figure of $500. And then lately I put my mother's account with mine together, joined, because she's reaching an age where that's a burial money. Soon as Social Security picked up that I put her account on mine, they said I have more than $2,000. Now they called me in. They deducted my SSI, half of it, of $500 to $200 and change. Why? Why did they do that, Steve?
I don't know. It's a good question. So what did you do for a living?
I owned a big towing company called Dino's Towing back in the years.
Okay.
And so I just retired at 62. I'm getting my Social Security, but my SSI was my injury when I got hit by a car, and I lost my full movement of my leg because I can work still, but I was in bad shape. I had a knee replacement operation. So they gave me that. I went to their doctors to make it so that they need to know that I'm correct. And they gave me SSI. But as soon as I put my mother's account joint with mine, they said anything over $2,000 in your account that stops, and they called me in. I can't have over $2,000 in my account. I never heard of that before in any other administration. Is this something new with the Biden administration?
Well, I'm not an expert on this. I will say this, though, that, when you get SSI, that's because you've been injured on a job or something of that nature and you can't work. And, that's something we want people who become disabled to be able to, take care of themselves. And so it's an important program. I think, unfortunately, though, and I appreciate your calling in, I think there's a lot of fraud in these programs. And one of the things that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are talking about is eliminating the fraudulent payments of these programs. Because, when people legitimately get the check for being disabled or, you're eligible for Social Security or Medicare, obviously you paid into the program and you deserve it. But folks, one of the things that's bankrupting these programs is that we have hundreds of billions of fraud. And you don't have to take my word for it. I'm not making up these numbers. These come from the government, the federal government's own Government Accountability Office, which has been telling us for years, hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud. People money stolen from the PPP program. Remember that one? Remember the money for the for unemployment insurance, the money for food stamps, the money for Medicaid, all these programs. There's fraudsters throughout the world. And by the way, a lot of the money hasn't even been stolen by Americans. It's foreigners who figure out how to game the system, how to get checks from the federal government, and nothing has happened. And by the way, I have a piece in the New York Post that is based on your callers, you folks who call in. And in the piece that I had in the New York Post, I cited a lot of the examples of things that you told me about on this radio show. And it went in the New York Post. I know Vivek Ramaswamy and I know Elon Musk. I was told that they both read the piece. So when you give me these ideas on this radio show, I get them to the people in power who are hopefully going to do something about it. I have very, very high confidence in both Vivek Ramaswamy and with Elon Musk, because I think they're experts, they're efficiency experts, and we don't have to cut vital government programs. We don't have to cut education. We don't have to cut, Medicare. We don't have to cut people's, our national defense. We just have to cut out the waste. We're going to take one more break. One more just quick break. We'll be back 1 minute. We have time for 2 or 3 more callers. We have one line open at 1-800-848-9222. That's the More Money Hotline, 1-800-848-9222. And I do want to hear, what is your favorite Christmas movie? At the end of the show, I will tell you mine. We'll be right back.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Hello, folks. This is the More Money Show. We're having a lot of fun this afternoon. We're on every Saturday afternoon, 1 to 3 on WABC, the #1 radio station in America. Love your calls, by the way. I love listening to what you folks have to say. I learn so much from it, and I turn over your great information to the policymakers in Washington. So thank you so much. By the way, after the show is over, get out and, it's cold. It's brisk out. I live in Maryland. It's cold today, but it's sunny, and there's nothing better for your health than to get out some sunshine, some fresh air, some exercise. But do that after the show is over. And we've got about 20 more minutes here, but I think we have I believe Mr. Producer Mike is next.
Hello, Steve.
Hi, Mike.
16% of the budget goes for federal grants.
Yes.
A lot of the money disappears.
Yes.
Can you let Musk know about that?
I will. I mean, you're right. We send this money. We send this out to, and a lot of it goes to corporations, big corporations. A lot of it goes to fraudsters, and nobody tracks what happens to that money, Mike. And you're right. I've tried to add up how much these federal grant programs are spending, and they are close to $500 billion. By the way, not $500 billion, $500 billion of these grants go on. Everybody's living off government largesse. It's a total fraud. And it is a shame that we're letting this money out. By the way, every time the government misspends a dollar, that's your money. That's your money they're spending. It's my money. They act as if it's the tooth fairy that's passing out this money. No, if the government can only spend a dollar if they take a dollar from you and me. It's that simple, Mike. It's a great point. Thanks for calling in. And hooray, we actually have some women calling in. Thank you. And I think at the top of the list is Pamela. Thank you for calling in.
Good afternoon. I have like 3 comments real quick. Yes. To help that gentleman out with the SSI, most programs have limits as to how much you can make. And as soon as he made a joint account with his mother, they can count it. That's your account. He's better off doing power of attorney if he has to take care of his mom and separate the account.
Excellent. And by the way, how do you know so much about that program?
Well, years ago, my dad was a mechanic, and he had 2 heart attacks. I see. And but the rules change over time. You know how much money you can make, yada yada yada.
Oh, okay, so I got it.
He has to look that up, and and my father was too young to get, and they didn't have disability back then.
Okay, so what is your second and third point?
Okay, we need to that lady's comment about gambling. I see the homeless buying lottery tickets.
I know, it's incredible.
I have to wait online in the supermarket to get customer service because so many people want to get rich quick. We have lost our moral compass. This gambling is out of hand. Also, most of the drug addicts, and I just had to go through, the post office just now, which is really sad, and see the homeless out in this cold.
Yes.
It's really, really sad. Most of them start out as mentally ill, and they self-medicate with alcohol and drugs. We need to get back to proper institutions for 24/7 care for these people. It's a disgrace. Our society is a disgrace as long as these people are on the streets.
Pamela, great points. I couldn't agree more, and I really appreciate your call. And it just breaks my heart to see people who are suffering, who are cold at night, who are homeless. And you're right. So many of them have drug addiction problems, and that we have to attack the source. By the way, that's why Trump is so right about, if you're going to bring dangerous and addictive and lethal drugs into this country, we're going to put a tariff on you unless you don't do it. Okay, I'm going to quickly go to Mary. Mary, literally have 2 minutes left. I appreciate so much you calling in, Mary.
Oh, hi. Hello?
You're on.
Yeah, hey. Thanks for taking my call, Mary from Queens. To piggyback on what you were talking about, dangerous drugs coming into the country.
Yes.
I'd love to see some awareness raised as a parent of a couple of kids in college in New York.
Yep.
I did work in a lot of fraud, medical fraud and Wall Street fraud for years. So I kind of trained in that area. But I have unearthed, thanks to my kids, something super disturbing. You talk about drugs coming in. Well, the majority of our I don't know if the people know this, I didn't know this, most of the student health insurance plans in colleges across the country, people would say, oh, that's just state schools. Well, I hate to break it to everyone, but it's also private, Christian, Catholic. There are subclauses if parents think, oh, my plan might not be that good for my kid. There are subclauses buried, and I saw for myself that actually pay for it, not only abortions, which, that's accordance with each family, not to interfere.
Mary, I've literally got 20 seconds left. So
it also, this is where it's the kicker, pays for transitional surgeries. And I think
ridiculous.
I think that needs to be, parents need to understand that that's in clauses of things they're purchasing.
Oh, it's terrible. Terrible. Mary, great call. Thank you so much. And by the way, folks, we are just about out of time because we've got one more segment with Bob and Ryan Payne. But before I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And by the way, we will be on next weekend as well before Christmas. But I want to tell you my favorite Christmas movie is, of course, A Miracle on 34th Street. Folks, have a great week ahead. Get out, get some exercise, get some fresh air, get some sunlight,